living and breathing. Why are you talking to me between that? That was money. That was just money.
You can do that one again.
Take 13. Living and breathing.
Guys, welcome to the Boa Life podcast. After 15 takes of the hosts messing up with the intro, we decided to just let the guests get going. So here we are, talk about life, fun, anything that comes up during today's conversation, because it's all about you guys. It's giving you guys an opportunity to just sit back, relax, and listen and understand that we all have shit that goes wrong in our lives. We're all on a quest to have happier lives, and we're on a quest, of course, to get that life-work balance. But you know what? Let's get this show going. Over to Nick and Steve.
You're hired.
Yeah, take my money.
Listen, don't be fooled. It's not that he's good at this. It's the accent that just makes him sound wonderfully eloquent. No, he's fantastic at it. Who am I kidding?
You know, I've always said English people sound smarter, just in general. Even like a kid, you see a kid on like a YouTube video with an accent, you're like, wow, that kid is smarter than me.
If he puts glasses on, we'll just have to leave and just let him have the room.
No, listen, if this is what we're going to start off with, this does give me an opportunity to talk about this. So I'm from Southeast London, right? Proper working class part of London. We just got hooked up. They just decided recently that Southeast London was worthy of getting like subway connections. And my accent is not associated with being intelligent. In fact, when I went to the equivalent of college, they said to me that Southeast London, apparently 200 words of, we've only got about a vocabulary of 200 words, and about 100 of those words are swear words. So when I came over to the US and people would tell me that I sound intelligent, it was great, because, you know, I spent my life with an accent that basically suggested that I was from Southeast London, which meant I was aggressive and gangster-like and not intelligent. So I just want to let you know that I really appreciate the compliments about the accent, because I did actually spend a long part of my life having to lose my Southeast London accent, because that's how I used to talk a lot like that, mate. I used to talk a lot like that.
Well, how different is it now compared to that?
Now, actually, a lot of people say I sound American now. A lot of people say I've lost my accent. I spent a little bit of time in Australia for a while, and I picked up a twang, I think. So some people confuse me with Australian, but I felt like I've actually lost my identity because I lost my London accent. No one seems to be able to pinpoint me anywhere. And but one thing that I am not is intelligent. I wouldn't necessarily count myself as intelligent. It's weird because obviously I'm a professor at a university. I try and work on being as clever as I can, but I'm not. And I feel like quite often I mess up and say things that are wrong. I get people's names. So sometimes, like, you know, I'll say Steve Demora, I'll say, like, you know, Steve Demir, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's so cute. He's got like an accent. That's how they say it in England. No, it's not. It's just because I got your name wrong,
But
pal.
there you go. You can get away with it.
Yeah, no, they do. They say I can get away with it, but...
Well,
yeah.
I appreciate the humility. I try to be as humble as I can. But if someone's going to say I'm smart, I'm going to take that.
Yeah, all right.
But obviously, I've worn this jersey here for you. I know it's not your team. Your team is not Chelsea, but this is a British team. We've got a Portuguese last name in the back, but I am a fan of soccer, as you are. What your team is?
Crystal Palace, and we actually played Chelsea first game of the season.
Really?
We do. I can't remember if it's at Crystal Palace's ground or at Chelsea's ground, but I'm looking forward to that because we've got a new manager, and we're actually got a lot of young players coming in, trying to do some new tactics, playing three at the back, trying to play more offensive. So I think it could be a disaster.
Oh, geez.
But yeah, we'll see.
Does it contribute to a good life, being a fan?
No. So let's start off when it comes to, so on reflection, the day that I chose to support Crystal Palace was a bad decision when it came to living a good life. And of course, I've now imposed that on my kids, so I feel a little bit bad. And
it's like being a Knicks fan.
Yeah, no, it's not good. It's not good. It's not good. And I remember the day my dad pretty much tricked me, bribed me, in a really good way. It was I was a Liverpool fan. That's Liverpool were the team back in the day when I was young, right? So, you know, they won everything. They're the team that everyone wants to support. I'm 8 years old. If you ask me who I support, I say Liverpool. They're probably one of the few teams that I know. Now, I had gone to watch a couple of Crystal Palace games. but I didn't really know enough about football to know who I was really watching anyway. I just knew that I was a Liverpool fan. And that year, Liverpool actually beat Crystal Palace 9-0. But my dad was smart. He took me to Crystal Palace v Liverpool in January that same season. So this is 1989-1990 season. And he took me to the game because he said I supported Liverpool, and we went to the game, and I was really excited. They were in their kind of like, grey outfit. I remember it really well. Ian Rush, John Barnes. They beat us 2-0. See, I'm saying us. I was happy because Liverpool won. And my dad took me to the club shop after the game. And we waited in that line for, I don't know, like an hour just to get a scarf. And a scarf. So that's what you do. That's like, so that's.
I thought that was slang for
listen,
any kind of
no.
apparel.
Listen, we didn't have money to go buy a soccer jersey at the time. And the main thing is, and how you show what team you support is through the scarf. So we're in this line, and there I am. I'm 9 years old. And we eventually get to the front, and I'm looking at the Liverpool scarves. I'm like, do I do the grey one? Do I do the red one? They had like a red and a green one. And I'm like, I'm about to become a real Liverpool fan. I mean, that's next level. I've seen Liverpool play, and I've got a scarf. And so my dad said, what do you want? And I'm about to like go for the grey Liverpool scarf. And he says, you know what? If you get a Crystal Palace scarf, I'll get you a Crystal Palace hat. And I was like, whoa.
Game changer.
I wasn't ready for that, right? And I was like, whoa. And as a 9-year-old, I suddenly worked out that, well, my dad supports Palace, which wasn't a strong enough reason at the time for me to support them. But I did work out about the fact that I'd been to some Palace games before. And so in that moment, I said Crystal Palace because I wanted the hat and I figured I'd see him more often. So I got the hat, the scarf, and then I made my commitment on that day, January 1990, to support Crystal Palace for the rest of my life. And no, it did not lead to a good life when it came to football. It did not. I wish I could go back and change that. I've witnessed Palace get relegated, the heartache, the pain. Yes, I've seen them get promoted. I've had season tickets, the joy. There's nothing like ups and downs of football. And the stress that it gives me is not good. Like, I struggle to watch Crystal Palace games. So I don't know. It's an emotional sport. There's times in your life. It's like a girlfriend, I suppose. In some ways, it's like that girl you should break away with because the relationship's not good for you, and you kind of get away from it. But then kind of sucks you back in, and even though it's bad for you, you can't live without it.
It certainly gives you perspective. That's for sure.
Yeah, it does. But Selhurst Park, on a serious note, Selhurst Park became a place, that's Crystal Palace's home ground. It became a place that I developed a really special relationship with my dad, right? And it's something that I've tried to establish with my own kids. So every time we go back to the UK, we go and see Crystal Palace ground, even if we just walk around it. I try and get my kids the jerseys because it's who I am. It's part of the identity of not just me, but also that, my dad's not around now, but my children's grandfather, who they don't know. So it's almost like by them being connected to Crystal Palace Football Club, as supporters, they're connected a little bit to my past and their grandfather. So yeah, there's a history there.
It's funny. I feel similar, and it's you question whether or not you want your children to be fans of the same teams you are, and you're pushing them to do that. And I know I'm constantly trying to do that. And then they talk about liking a team that's, like now Tampa Bay, I'm a diehard Dallas Cowboy fan, so I want my kids to be that. And I want them to like my soccer club team, but they want their own identity. And it's a tough position as a parent to try to figure out what to do. But I agree with you. When they have that love for a similar team that you have, whatever sport it may be, I think it automatically creates a connection, just like it does for fans.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be I'm sure you've been in a sporting event or at a football game or soccer, right? A soccer game, as we say here in the States, and your team scores, and all of a sudden you're embracing a stranger. You don't even know them, but you're embracing them because it's like your brothers in arms at that time. So I totally get that. And in some way, that memory that you shared with your father is that, that's echoing now in your life and helping you hopefully raise your children and think about those experiences and try to have those experiences with them. And actually opens the doors to something. You have a podcast yourself, and what is that about? The podcast.
The podcast so we started in January, and I think we kind of released it early March. It's called Fueling Creativity. Doing it with a colleague called Cyndi Burnett. So both of us are kind of creativity scholars per se, and we're trying to kind of bridge this gap between a gap that we see at least between kind of research and practice. So you can have researchers of creativity, how to better cultivate, educate young children for creativity in the classroom, for the creativity at home. And sometimes that knowledge can kind of get locked up in scholarly journals, and it's not really accessible to the people that might benefit the most from it, teachers, parents. And so what we're hoping to do with the Fueling Creativity podcast is kind of get authors of some of those important works onto the show to talk about their work, but in a way that makes it more accessible to kind of like a wider audience. And so I think we've done like 12, 13 episodes now. We kind of release one every couple of weeks. And we're kind of wrapping up season 1 and looking at going into season 2. Might change up the format a little bit. But it definitely is focused more on kind of like childhood development, cultivating creativity skills in education and home environment, which is something that I certainly care a lot about doing with my boys.
And as all parents here, it's it's ironic how these themes kind of interconnect, how you're having this experience where you're trying to reach the masses just like we are for things we're passionate about. And my co-host Nick always talks about consistency, right? In health and fitness, and certainly in what we're doing here. And what I think is very important to the three of us is consistency in raising our children. What do you find some of the best ways to bring out the creativity in yourself and in your children? Is there something that we can share with the audience that really help them be better parents and better anything, really?
Well, I think, first of all, anyone who's got more than one child, you've got to realize that there's not necessarily the same playbook that you can implement for the same kids. I think probably what I would say is trying to expose them to as many opportunities and experiences as possible, and things that I don't think we do enough of is take the kids to the museums, to the zoos, nature walks, right? Like I look back and I've done a few articles. I've also got a blog called dadsforcreativity.com, and I've shared some blog articles around this with my eldest child. But like those nature walks, you go get the bug box, you find the caterpillar, you bring the caterpillar back home. We've had great success, and sometimes that caterpillar then kind of like turning into a cocoon, or as my boys remind me, chrysalis, and then they kind of like blooms as a butterfly. And you see that wonder and curiosity, those questions that emerge, right? How did that happen, right? What other creatures kind of like go through that process? The discoveries that they make when they go on those nature walks, the questions they generate when they go on these museums. So I think that in itself, just exposing them to lots of experiences. And I do think that's important, because one of the things that I notice in the American culture, though, it's that sports, it's like every single evening. So I was late, right? I was late because there's a soccer training today. Yesterday it was piano, right? Like every evening is something, and we get these into these kind of like really rigid schedules. And so I think just make sure you got 1 or 2 days where it's like you've got the ability to come and try something new and expose them to something new. That's what I would say. And then as soon as they get curious about it, go and expose them a little bit more to it and get them to ask questions about it.
I love that. We have to have that mindset, because it's like you see your kid and they're about to jump in a puddle, and sometimes as parents, no, don't do that. It's like, let them jump in the damn puddle and have fun, you know?
Yeah, it's really hard to like draw that line. How much do you give them, you know? Like maybe your kid's not feeling well. Do you want to leave the house tonight and go do something? You probably should, right? You know? Like you say, try to get them out and do something creative, do something fun, show them something that may educate them. And as a parent, you probably feel a lot, you're not doing enough. You know, are you exposing them to as much as you actually can? Or are you just sitting home on the couch, kind of like, you know, lounging around? So how do you manage that? I know you have 3 little boys, so it's probably mayhem in your living room every night. But how do you just mentally try to come up with stuff and then say, should I do this or should I do that?
Well, it's. I think mentioning the number is a factor, right? So that the Matthew of 8 years ago, when there was one child, could sit here and was like, great parent and had lots of time doing that. But yeah, when kid 2 comes along and kid 3 comes along, it's been a lot harder to do that. And I can't really sit here and say I've been the best parent either. I have that guilt, right? Like I should be doing more with them. But I do try and limit the time on the devices, right? Like, and listen, at the same time, I do also use the devices as a tool, right. But I've worked really hard to not allow the devices to just be seen as game consoles. So my boys, all of them in one way or another, kind of utilize YouTube. So my youngest utilizes YouTube to help draw. So he really loves drawing. And he actually can sit for an hour and just watch an how to draw video. And he's watching and drawing and pausing, and he's 4. My eldest will go and use YouTube, and he's learning about the histories of the world. So right now he's really into Russia and battles between Russia and Finland. And he's telling me about the Vikings at the moment, Denmark, and how they kind of like moved around in Northern Europe. And then my middle one is really into soccer training videos at the moment. So he's just watching soccer training videos. So, just taking that extra 5 minutes to know what they're doing with their devices has helped me, so I still can be a zombie on the couch on Sunday morning. But then the other thing is things like, what I've learned is to utilize breaks between the sports schedules. So ice hockey typically comes to an end, like let's say in March. I try not to rush to the next thing immediately. I try and give it a couple of months. And then when and where I can, I would try and keep one of those weekend days as free as possible. So I'm one of those people that will kind of pile up a Saturday where it's like, go, in order to safeguard a Sunday. And most of those Sundays, you're a zombie. But one of those Sundays can be the Sunday where you do the nature walk, or it can be the Sunday where you go to the museum. So I suppose it's a bit of like being sensible with how you utilize the devices, because we do need them. I think in today's world, I think I'll just be upfront. I do struggle. And then the other piece is thinking about being strategic with how you schedule events.
It sounds like you have like just a whole jar full of stuff, and you could pick stuff out depending on the day.
No, so I'm not that cool. I don't want to be claimed as that cool.
Being creative, it's almost like just instilled in you, I feel, just listening.
I think it's letting the child take the lead. I think it's you sit back and you look at you look at how the child is acting in that given day, right? So this morning they woke up and they set up some islands, right? So they had their own world. Lucas had his world, Liam has his world, Theo has his world. And there wasn't a need for a parent to come in and intervene, right? So that was a day where I didn't have to intervene. There's other days you wake up and you can see that they're going to need some facilitation. And that's the day where I tell you, it's small things. Like I got a box of those Home Depot, you can make the hammers and nails, and you can like make bird boxes. Yeah. And you can mate, they're awesome, right? So sometimes it's just a case of, right, let's go do an hour and do that for a while. Other times you do just kick them outside, lock the door and say, dude, guys, go play. So sometimes it's not necessarily me, and there has been times when particularly when I just have one child or 2 children, I am able to go and come up with the activity. And I think things like Pinterest, right? Pinterest is a great place to pull up activities if you're interested in doing those things. But I think other times it's just a case of actually forcing them to go and be creative. Because again, coming back to the devices, I don't want to pick on the devices too much, but I think we all are vulnerable to sitting back and allowing those devices to entertain our children. And we think it's an hour, but actually if you go look at the amount of time, it's 4 or 5 hours a day, and it's usually just one game, and that's what we got to kind of get the balance right. I want to emphasize, I'm not criticizing anyone who does it, but
I think we had a podcast where we spoke a lot about that, the benefits of it, but also, the downfalls.
Yeah, the pitfalls. It's a reoccurring theme where, it's not the elephant in the room anymore. It's that people are cognizant that it's an unbelievable tool, mm-hmm. and it should be used in that fashion. And sometimes, it's becoming a crutch. I think that, in search of that good life is always balance. So it's, the balance between activities and exposing your children to a lot of different things. I know you're an ambitious person, just like Nick and I are. Where do you find that work-life balance that everyone talks about? Because I think that in getting that life in the right place, I mean, you have to make sure that, you're doing things for yourself, you're meeting your career ambitions, and then balancing, your wife and making sure you're spending enough time with her and facilitating that relationship and taking care of kids and a household. It's like, how do you do, and no one does it perfectly, but how are you balancing or trying to maintain a balance of all those things?
I mean, if I'm honest with you, I'd love to open it and push that back to you guys, because when you reached out, and Nick, you reached out, I think Steve, you kind of like made a comment and said, I might invite you on the podcast. The invitation never came. And then eventually Nick reached out a couple of weeks later.
Well, so to clear the air there, the reason I didn't was because Nick had mentioned it, and I was like, definitely. And then I didn't want to, steal the invite from it being me to him. So that was...
Yeah, Steve and I are still pretty competitive.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with me not... Because I would have pulled the trigger, believe me.
No, but when I heard it was the show about the good life, I was like, what an awesome show, right? Because if I'm honest with you, I don't think I'm having a midlife crisis, but I've started to ask that question, right? Mm-hmm. What is a good work-life balance? And I don't know if I've found the answer yet, and I don't know if I'm practicing a good work-life balance. But what I do know is that I need to hit the pause button and make a greater effort to try and pursue that. And someone took me through this activity recently, and I do want to come back onto you guys, because I feel like you're almost like has created this show, perhaps because you're going through a similar thing and you're
searching
trying to
for that answer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're hitting for me, you're hitting the nail on the head. It's the struggle I think that we have and trying to get as much perspective as we can from other people that are in similar shoes as us, because I'm constantly questioning whether I'm doing enough for my family, enough for myself. Am I doing too much work? Throw in a pandemic that completely turns everything upside down. Deal with social media, technology running amok. Well, not running amok, but we're in that age group where I remember in high school playing video games. They weren't even video games. It wasn't even a computer. I had a word processor right before high school. So we've dealt with this immense change, and it's hard to get perspective, and just even my train of thought now, it's like haphazard. It's because there's just so much going on. I feel that where we are in our lives with where we are in our careers, where are the ages of our children, where we are in our relationship, it's like it can be chaos, and it's to get order out of that chaos is a dance, really. So having these conversations and hearing how people cope with stress, deal with tragedy, deal with successes, how they deal with ambition, hopes and dreams, stuck in ruts. It's like all these conversations are unraveling and creating themes and roadmaps for maybe us finding the balance that I think we need in our life. And Nick and I've always said, are very different in a lot of ways, and then we find out how similar we are in a lot of other ways. And it's like, he's a guy that talks about fitness being easy, and I've struggled with food and weight my whole life, continue to. And I have all the answers. I know how to do it, but I don't have. Was it the willpower? Is the self-control? I mean, what is it? Is it that my energy is lacking because I'm putting my energy towards being a good career man and trying to be the best family man, and then maybe not being as selfish with myself and my nutrition and working out more? I don't know. These are the answers that I'm in search for myself. I don't know that we'll ever have an answer to these questions, but I think these conversations certainly help, in getting the balance that we need and maybe some of the answers that we're in search of.
And there's kind of like a wisdom to that reflection though as well. I think I wonder whether or not there's a certain amount of life experience we have to have, right? That allows us to get to a point where we begin to realize the importance of a work-life balance. because we're at a point where we're beginning to reflect on the different pieces that make up our life and what we want to prioritize the most. I mean, I read a book by Brene Brown, who does a lot of work around kind of like, courage to lead and leaderships and the type of qualities and value systems that make good leaders. And someone kind of like put me onto that book and kind of did an exercise with me where we kind of go through a whole bunch of different values that Brene Brown has found through her work, and then she says that there's probably more values out there. And I kind of went through this exercise, and there's like 250 words that each represent a value. And so recently I've been asking this question, and I decided to go and conduct this exercise where I kind of say, right, the goal is to identify 1 or 2 values that you practice and clearly are ingrained in who you are as a person. And then you recognize the fact you have to try and live life by those values. And so when I was going through this exercise, you start off, you got your 200 words, you narrow it down to 50 of them, you narrow it down to 25 of them, you narrow it down to 10 of them. And family was obviously there, right? Health was there. And, a whole few other words. And I got to my last 5 or 6, and the person I was working with in the exercise, they said, I know you want to put family in there, but is family really a value that you practice? I know you want to put health there, but is it really? It's the value we should uphold, but is it really the value you practice and is ingrained in who you are based on your actions? And I looked at it, I said, well, I've just come out of a kind of crazy few years where I would sometimes go to bed at 3 a.m., hardly eaten, but then still turn up for CrossFit. For Max's at 5:30 a.m. That's not practicing health, right?
No, and I always wondered why you did that, but. Yeah,
no, it's not practicing health. It's not practicing.
There's an argument that can be made
no,
that
it's
you
not
are, but yeah,
no,
you're right.
No, it's not, because I'm wise enough to know that my body actually needs sleep and needs nutrition,
rest.
And me kind of like feeling a bit oozy and dizzy because I'm like lacking nutrients is not me looking after my health. Like, I'm intelligent to know that is going to impact my body in the long run if I keep living life like that. Now, the flip side of it is that if I don't care about my health, am I really caring about my family? And then you look at how much time you take at work, right?
Yeah.
I'm not rushing no, sometimes I'm doing the emails at the weekends. I'm doing the emails at 8 p.m., right? That's not necessarily practicing family per se, right?
Right.
So what it really allowed me to do is I did identify 3 values, and I'm proud of those 3 values. But what I said to myself, and this was in March of this year, was the fact that I said to myself, you know what? Family obviously isn't a value that I practice and is ingrained into me, right? It's not the biggest priority in my life, but it should be. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my 3 values, and I've recognized that I do need to live life by those values. One of the reasons why I'm questioning life at the moment is because I've moved away from those values. And those values are things like integrity. It's about making a difference. And the third one's growth. So recently I felt like I'm not growing. I feel like I'm not really making a big difference in the world. And I feel to a certain extent that I've lost some integrity in what I'm doing as well. And so that, I think, has led to some dissatisfaction in my life. And I've got to get back to those values. But what I have said to myself as well is I want to work at making family an important part of my life and value system. And so I don't know if I've got the work-life balance per se, but I've got to a point in my life where I recognize that it is something that I should work to uphold. And so now the computer goes down at 5 or 6 p.m. and I don't pick it up. And you know what? Let's be honest, it doesn't make a difference if you write that email at 7 p.m. or 6 a.m.
And if I'm being honest, this is the same things I struggle with, because you're at home and it's dinner time and it's like, put the phone away. And it's not even always work. Sometimes it's, because I'm working all day. So I get home, I tell my wife, well, I want to see what's going on in the world. And just like, be present with the family. And it's a constant struggle. And I do want to be clear, like work-life balance, sometimes I say that I have a friend that, is a stay-at-home dad. And for the stay-at-home moms, it's like, they're working too. Like that's, so like, to be clear, it's like, all these things are about balance, and if you're a stay-at-home parent and you're working hard, I mean that's your work. So, but staying true to who you are and figuring out what you need I think you hit the nail on the head. It's so important. But I feel like with all the stimuli that we have, that it's very easy to lose. It's very easy to lose perspective, and it's kind of funny that you talk about integrity, because I'm wholeheartedly a believer of being honest all the time, right? Because once you start to not be honest, then you start to lose track of who you are. You're not honest with yourself. It's like, yeah, I'm fine. I don't need to go on a diet. It's like you start to, make excuses for yourself, and you can't lose perspective in life. And I think having these conversations, learning, reading books, listening to conversations about how we can improve or be better or be better balanced, I think that this is a necessity in our life, for even if it's just for the simple point of having perspective. And you do that by looking at people that are similar to you, your equals, and figuring out what they're doing and where they're at, and trying to be as honest as you can with yourself about where you are. It can be very difficult to look at what you're doing in life, and for the most part, I think all of us are probably on a pretty good track. I mean, I can't even imagine what that would be like for people that aren't where we are, which is, I think, if not close to living that BOA life, on the path to it, but people that are really far away from it. I mean, what it must look like to look at yourself in the mirror and say how you're falling short and being, I mean, when I do it, and I don't know if you guys do, though, I'm kind of constantly trying to stack myself up against myself, who am I today? Who was I yesterday? And it could be very hard to look at all the places that you lack. As a father is the hardest. As a husband, it's easy because I feel like I'm lacking all the time. Mm-hmm. As a friend, I mean, and you start looking at yourself and all these different aspects of your life, and you're like, wow, I mean, there's so much room for improvement. And I think once you have an idea of who you are, what you want to be, and then work towards that, I think I think that's a useful. I mean, I'm gonna actually use what you were just saying and really, like, yeah, what do I want? Like, what are my pillars? Like, what's my holy trinity? I think probably all would have family as one of those, and it's like you start rewinding how you've been, and you're going to start changing a lot of stuff. Like I said, just I've tried to make it a habit now where I come into the house for dinner time and I put my phone on the charger. I'm actually glad my phone is starting to get outdated. I don't know if you noticed this. Like, once your phone gets a little old, the battery goes within like 20 minutes every day. So I get home, I put it on the charger, and then I just try to be present. And I think, like, having family dinners and doing as much as you can to have those precious times. And I know we all have young families. In a blink of an eye, I think that everybody should use this tool. I don't know if you guys do, but we have the phones. Again, use a tool. Go back and look at photos when you can, and you see when they were babies, and then as they've grown older, and it's like, it makes you happy, it makes you sad, you have all kinds of emotions. But I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to improve oneself, but even harder to look at where you are right now and try to improve on that. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's like something I'm certainly going to use in my life for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look at yourself in the mirror every morning, like you were just saying. That's the hardest thing to do. And then actually try to come up with an answer of, what you're lacking. That ultimately, that's the hardest thing to do. Yeah. And I'm sure, like many people, we all struggle with that. There's no perfect answer to it. And sometimes you fail at it. Sometimes you do find an answer, and then you start to work on it. But I'm sure you fail as many times as you succeed with that. So just keep plugging away every day.
And I think the idea of, like, that concept of plugging away every day, it introduces the idea of kind of like just trying to be the best person you can be each day, right? And the comparison piece is so dangerous, right? Like, I'm finding myself at times comparing to how I was a few years ago. It seems crazy. I can't, that energy levels that I had with the boys, they're just not there anymore. Maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't. But I know that when I make a comparison to how I was a few years ago, it's pretty depressing. And one of the things that I realized, recently, and you talk about tragedy. I mean, I had a tragic event in my life, 18 months ago at the beginning of the pandemic, my mum kind of like unexpectedly died, and it does. So I think everything that I just, thank you. But I think everything that you shared when you asked me that question, and even the show that you did, I think that really began my journey of reflection. And that's why I did that exercise to try and understand my values. And I realized that I'd moved away from my values, and I have to come back to my values, but then also identify what values that I do care about, and I need to work harder to get. But it's each day. It's like, I think that idea of like looking yourself in the mirror every day and saying, was I the best person I could be today, right? And just reflect and say yes. And then tomorrow's a new day. And sometimes you're going to say no. I messed up, I shouted at my kid because I was tired. Maybe I didn't have to shout in that moment. But don't say I'm a terrible father. In that moment, you lost it. Your patience was low, right? I also have got in the habit of apologizing to my kids, right? Sometimes I do. I snap at them. And I go over, I give them a hug, I give them a kiss. I'm sorry I snapped at you, right? It wasn't your fault. And every single time they give me this hug and a kiss and say, it's okay, I know.
Yeah. We're human beings. We're gonna make mistakes, and your kids know.
Yeah.
They're gonna give you the benefit of the doubt, and I think that's the important thing is to like snap out of it,
Yeah.
And to me, it's all about setups and feedback loops. It's like the one thing I learned, I can actually empathize with you because obviously I lost my mother as well, and when I was younger, and it changes you forever for sure. But the one thing that I can always look back, and the lesson that I learned in life from her was positivity. Mm. My mother was positive her whole life, even through cancer, she was positive. And I can find myself, or even my wife and I, sometimes you get, caught in this negative, mindset. And it's the worst thing you can do. It's like, my mother always had it right. It's like, don't waste your time with garbage. And in life, it's like, be positive. You're going to mess up. Don't be hard on yourself. Think about all the good things you're doing as a parent. Because I mess up all the time as a parent. I yell. I do things I regret all the time. And it's like, let yourself off the hook and be positive and feed off of, being a good person, smiling, having integrity. Mm. And then at the end of the day, that's the best thing you can give your kids. And then you're also giving them a mirror, right?
That's a good point.
As parents, we're trying to I always tell my wife, it's like we're all hypocrites, but I'm like, do what I say, don't do what I do. And my wife's like, you have to model good behavior, being the teacher that she is. And she's right. It's like, they're watching everything we do. And it's like, you hold yourself up to the highest of standards if you love your kids, because that's what you want them to be one day, is good citizens, good people. And it's freaking hard to do, but that's why we're doing this. I don't know what called you to do your podcast and to be in education. I imagine it's because you have, a voice and you have something to say and you want to teach, you have that teacher's heart. I think for Nick and I to finally have the courage to be like, we're going to do this. We feel like there's a void. And even if there's not a void, we have something to say. And our intentions are to help people. And let's do it. And there's 100 different reasons why people don't want to do this stuff. People are judgmental. They're going to watch and they're going to be like, what are these two idiots talking about? Matt and like they're up there talking and nobody wants to. It's like, no, there's people out there that want to hear what we have to say. We'll learn something and it'll change their lives for the better. And finally, I'm in a place where I'm sure you are, and I know Nick is, where, we're here to stay. We have a voice. We're going to talk, and we're going to do what we can to help people. And I'm not really worried about, the negativity and what people may have to say about it, because at the end of the day, there's a purpose and there's meaning in my life.
But they're not your audience though. So that's the other thing, if you think about the show, I think kudos to you guys. Again, when Nick reached out and you said it's about the good life, I just immediately connected with it. And so I felt like, I haven't seen this show, but I'm like, I kind of get, because I know you guys, we're in a similar place in life. I immediately probably got the feel of what you was trying to accomplish. Your audience is people like me, and they're going to make those connections, and they are going to listen, they are going to engage. The people who don't understand this, it's because they're not the audience. Not everyone is in our situation. We can only relate to ourselves and connect with the people that can relate to us. And of course, there's going to be people out there that we can't relate to as well.
Right.
So, but I think what you're doing is is an important show to have, and you know, there's a lot of things that I think we all go through in life that are similar. I think all of us probably, if we're honest, you know, have to face some mental health challenges as well. That I don't think guys do enough talking about this. I mean, this probably isn't the show to go on, because I feel like at some point I want to do a big speech about that. But that's something like, you know, it's not just about the work-life balance. Let's be honest with you, we're all starting to feel signs that we're aging and having to come to terms with what that means, and you know, the types of doors that might begin to open, or the experiences that we might face as a consequence of going through that process. And I think we don't, as I'm just focusing on guys now because I kind of relate as being a guy, but I don't think we can talk about that enough. But it's amazing how many comments I listen to and I'm like, I know what you're going through. I know what that comment's actually about. And, you know, I think the work-life balance is one thing, but also just learning to accept and breathe.
I think women are more willing to speak about it, and men have this, you know, I don't have it as much because I'm more of a verbal person, but I think men, we all have insecurities, but men have more insecurities and don't want to verbalize, and they feel like they're not being men if they're telling other people about how they're struggling. And it's like, let it go. You know, we're all human beings. We all have issues. It's like, talk about it, you know, talk when you have, and there's some people that don't have friends or family to discuss it. And this might be their only venue to hear other people going through the same struggles. And it's funny how you mentioned connections. I agree. You know, that's what we're all in search for. And there's going to be a lot of people that connect right away with us. And I hope we have a broad range of people that we can connect to, but we are facilitating that with different guests, because you know, some guest is going to bring a new interesting perspective, and people are going to be able to connect to that and learn from that, or empathize with it, or share an experience. And it's funny how you put cameras and a mic in front of people, and they open up in ways I never thought that people would open up. You know, usually you put a mic in front of someone that they kind of close down and don't really talk about themselves. But I feel like this is really a vehicle for people to like really share experiences. And it's like, this is their moment to like have a voice and like go out there and connect with people and try to help them. I think at the end of the day, I think we're all trying to do that, you know, selfishly trying to help others because we want that help, you know?
Yeah. And this brings back to what you said about social media and everything we've got going on, but like we're overwhelmed with like all these like wonderful images. Like I mean, we've got a mutual friend who put up the best image. They put up, I don't know if you've seen it, they put up like 24 images of trying to get the perfect family shot. And of course, all the 24 images of the kids are terrible, right? No one's smiling. That's real life, right?
Exactly.
Like kudos if you've lucked out by out of the 200 photos, you found one of them that looked like it was perfect and you put it on social media. But let's be honest, that image isn't telling the story of what took place in that image, right? And it's like, we've got this pressure of always trying to like be perfect. And I think, as we know, teenagers are suffering from it, you know, younger adults are suffering from it, but we're suffering from it as well. And, you know, I think this show, just being open and honest and having frank discussions is again, there's going to be an audience that are going to want to connect and talk about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, I think it's important, and more so nowadays than it's ever been because of with social media. Like we always talk about the filter, right?
Oh, there's a horrendous filter out there that everyone's using. Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, you have to survive, and how is everyone surviving? You know, they're putting a filter up, they're putting a facade up for everyone to see, to get people to like them, or to get hits on their picture or whatever. And that's probably the biggest struggle for anyone, not just kids these days.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that when we were growing up. You know, I still remember having a beeper, and my first cell phone, it was like a two-way radio. There was no iPhone. You couldn't watch a video. You couldn't even take a video. Yeah. I still struggle with that. You know, it's hard to put the phone down. It's been shown that it's like an addictive device already. It's like a drug. So yeah, it's a big struggle.
But what I do, if you don't mind, switch it onto your work-life balance, because you're someone that of course I could be wrong, but in terms of what you kind of like give off, and I don't know if you feel like this, Steve, but I feel like you seem to have like a really good work-life balance. And let me explain what I mean by that. you seem to smile more often than the average person. You seem to be, the way you respond to events and situations in your life, as you said, it's always a case of being positive and you know, I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to accept what life brings me. And then the other thing that I was always curious about is you just seem to love going and like working us out at training every morning, getting up there, always upbeat and happy, and like, you to me, you just seemed there to be there because you just loved and enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it so much. I was always fascinated by your ability to fit that in, because of course then you would rush to go and do your day job, right? But I was always fascinated about your ability to kind of like identify these 3 times. That and the fact he goes on vacation every like 3 or 4 weeks, right? But I was really fascinated by that.
That's how I stay so happy.
No, but I'm curious about that, because I couldn't work out, was it the connections with the people? Was it the fact that it was because you felt you were helping them stay healthy? Like, what was that satisfaction you were getting with the workouts each morning?
I think I just started small, like late teens, early 20s. You know, I grew up, I was just a skinny little runt, and you know, like most guys, you know, you want to put some muscle on. So it started like, you know, being a gym rat, and then it led to getting sick of paying for a gym membership. So I actually started working at one, and then that led to training, and then that led to just love being around people and the satisfaction that I got with my own body and how I felt, and how it felt so good to eat good and work out and wake up the next morning and feel great, and then obviously, you know, look great. You know, your friends see you and they're like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm being consistent in the gym. I like it. I love the way it feels. And I don't know, I've also always had this natural, like, just a feeling like I love to help people in a way that I don't want to tell them that I want to help them. Like, I want them to realize that I'm just showing them. And being in the medical field too, and then just, you know, training and doing physical stuff on the side and helping people get to that level where I know they can be. See, I found out through the physical stuff I put myself through and listening to other people online, you know, David Goggins is a huge influence. I came to realize that you're capable of so much more than you think of. And I'm sure you can say that too. Just look where, you know, where you are right now. And I found that it's worked for me, and I'm still working at it, but I want to help other people get there. I want to help them try it, get there, and then realize that they can do it too. Because, you know, what's the worst thing you do? You watch someone on a video on TV or YouTube or something, and you're like, that's impossible. That looks cool as hell, and I want to do it, but there's no way I'm going to be able to. Well, chances are, if you really tried, you probably could. Like, I remember Steve saying one time on a podcast, he's like, if I really wanted to, I could be the president of the United States.
Yeah.
And I really felt it. Like, I truly believed that. So, I don't know. I fell in love with it, and I stuck with it. I knew that, you know, I just can't be lazy. And just by not wanting to be lazy forced me to get out of bed and, you know, run around with 2 or 3 different jobs, and just like, that was it. And then it just snowballed, and I stuck with it. I found something that I felt I was good at. The response from people was great, and yeah, I stuck with it.
But you see, there's a value there, right? Like, so underneath all of that, what I'm hearing is the value of the fact that you were drawn to people, but you wanted to almost like help them help themselves, right?
Exactly.
And you saw health and fitness as a way to do that, right? You considered that as a way, as, you know, an outcome that betters their lives, and you can help them reach that betterment, right? And so it's like the actions that we do per se, like where you physically go to secure your paycheck, right? Or the building that you go to interact with the people, may be less important. The important fact is that the actions that you're taking in is meaning that value. And so it comes back to what I when I went through that exercise and thinking about those values, it really hit home. And, you know, one of the things that Brené Brown talks about, you know, and I've read a whole bunch of books over the summer, so I'm just kind of like focusing in on Brené Brown's book, but, you know, she speaks about what happens when you don't fulfill your values, right? And I'm like, oh my God, like that's literally what's happening to me. Like, I'm getting resentment a little bit at the moment. I have dissatisfaction and frustration in my life. And I suddenly look back and I'm like, over the last couple of years, and of course the tragic events that have happened in my life, the kids, the fact that I was finishing up a doctorate program, all of those meant that I had to sacrifice my values and just go into kind of like, survival mode over those 2-3 years. But because I've drifted so far away from those value systems, it's negatively impacting my life. And so one of the things that I've recently come to a realization is that I need to, as I look at planning the next decade, and one of the things I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I've always had a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan. Since I was like 21, I'm like, all right, here's this plan, I'm gonna do this. Usually it used to involve getting some type of like education or something, right? So I'm gonna go and get my degree, I'm gonna go and get my master's, I'm gonna go get another master's, I'm gonna go and get my doctorate program, right? And I set those goals. Then sometimes it would have, right, I'm going to complete a film by this year. I'm going to complete a film. The act of how good the film was per se was less relevant. It was more about this. I set myself the goal of trying to get a film. It wasn't, and I'd go and achieve that. I would want to go and travel to this many countries. And I always felt that I could adjust my 3-year plans and 5-year plans. But the other thing I've noticed over the last few years, and to a certain extent it's because I set the goal of getting a doctorate before I was 40, but I was like, I don't have a new 3-year or 5-year plan. So recently, I'm like, I've got to go and sit down and work out what my new 3-year and 5-year plan is going to be. And but before I did that, I wanted to get it right, because I did say to myself again, because of where we're at in our life, I was like, how many 3 and 5-year plans have I got left, So I'm kind of at that stage a little bit. So I said, why don't I go and really make sure that the next 3-year and 5-year plans that I set myself, fit to my value systems, and that every decision that I make as I go and engage in this 3 and 5-year plan and the decisions that I'm going to make during this period are decisions that meet my value systems. And I've only just got to the point where I'm making a commitment to those values, so I don't know how well I'm going to do at being successful, but again, that's why I thought it'd be good to just connect on the show, because that's literally what I'm trying to do at this time.
No, it's funny you say that, because I tend to be a planner too, and it's funny because I echo back to like another guest who said there are no plans. It's funny how people have different perspectives and see life differently. Because I'm a planner, I feel like I have to have short-term and long-term goals, because my mentality is I need something to aim for, and I feel like if you can see it, if you can believe it, you can achieve it. So, I mean, when you set out on this journey to accomplish goals, little by little, you just undertake whatever you need to do to get there. You talked about books. We've had, your brother-in-law big on books. I'm big on education and learning. I think the knowledge is the ultimate power. Another reason why I think this is incredibly important to have these conversations, because it's also, for some people, probably their only way of getting some knowledge. And some people don't read, or they don't have the time to, or don't think it's that important. I think that learning and knowledge is so important, because it just, why reinvent the wheel? It's like there's a lot of information out there. You got to make sure that you're reading the right stuff, and you're reading all sides of things, and then come to your own conclusions. But really, there's whatever niche you're in, there's literature there that can help you, self-improvement, coping with tragedy, stress. These conversations do the same thing these books do. So I think it's important for us to move forward, to continue to have conversations, and to read, and to educate ourselves, and to become better, evolve. Just like having these conversations and doing this podcast, I feel like Nick and I get better every time we do it. And, for every step forward, there's, sometimes a fall or a step back, but, in the end, as we progress, I think we're getting to a point where we're more comfortable. We're having, we're better interviewers, we're learning from our guests. Hopefully our guests are learning from us. But I think that we have to find meaning in our life, and we're doing that in many ways. And sometimes, maybe we're biting off more than we can chew, but I think it's still great to have what we all have is goals that we want to achieve, and do things that we want to do. And just, I don't remember, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt. It's the doer of deeds, the critic doesn't count. I always think of that quote, and I hope I didn't misquote who said it, but it's I feel bad for the timid souls that never undertake anything. It's like we're doing it. We're here. We're having the conversations. We're being parents. We're living life. It's like don't sit on the sidelines. Like do things. You're not gonna be successful in your undertakings. You're not gonna achieve all your goals. You're not gonna hit home runs. But like go out there, like for a worthy cause. Like you know what I mean. Try it out. What is the worst thing that can happen? I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen in my life is having regrets. Like, another really important reason I'm doing this is a legacy to my children. You lost your mother. I lost my mother. We've all dealt with loss. And the fact that one day, if I'm not around, that my kids could listen to this conversation and maybe say like, oh, is that what my father thought? And I don't want my kids to be a mini me. I don't want them to have the same dreams and hopes I have and do the same things or think the same way. They're individuals. Like you said, even when you're trying to be a parent, you're trying to tailor it to their individual personalities. But I at least want them to know, here, this is what my dad thought. I always think, like, would my mom be proud of what I'm doing? Is my father, proud of what I'm doing? And at the end of the day, I don't always do what my dad says. I like his opinion, but in the end, I'm going to be my own person and do what I think. I've talked about that in the past. Every time I've not done what he says, it usually doesn't turn out well, but every once in a while it does. But it's like, this is just a great vehicle for that, just to give a piece of ourselves to our children and even to the greater good. Maybe it helps someone out there.
I got to say, I've only met your dad a couple of times, but I don't think I've met a parent more proud of their son than your dad. And it doesn't take long for a couple of minutes on the football field to hear all of the Steve stories of soccer and everything. And so, I mean, it's actually really cool just listening to your dad. And in a weird way, when I listen to your dad sometimes, I'm like, I do think that's probably how my dad would kind of like speak about me.
So
so we had the camera down for a little, so it interrupted a little bit. But we came full circle where we had talked about the fact that myself and the guest here I think the first interaction we ever had was on a soccer field where I was a player, and I was a player who was very good, who then, when he met me, was already past my prime in basically a beer league. So all I did was talk at that point, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I used to play Sunday morning softball, slow pitch softball. Yeah, you played, because I saw you. So it was a night game. It was a night game. I think I was filling in for someone. One of my buddies called and like, I need an extra guy. So I come down, and this big burly guy comes to the plate, and I remember it specifically because you had on
bright soccer shoes,
bright yellow soccer shoes, and
they laughed until I hit.
Half the guys on the field didn't even have cleats on. This guy's coming out with tube socks and soccer cleats. And the way he's talking to everyone, and people are bantering him and everything, and he's just kind of rolling off. I'm like, look at this bully over here. So pitch comes, boom, over the fence. And
I hate it. Because he's got the confidence as well, so it must be really annoying. I can imagine the confidence.
I don't think I think he did a slow walk around the bases.
Yeah, I can imagine it. And he's soaking it in.
Infamous bat flip.
And I bet it's after a football game, right? It's probably after a
I
soccer game.
probably played soccer that day too.
And this is before I met my wife, so I didn't know the family, and I'm like, yeah, that was you.
That is funny. To be fair, I wasn't. I have no arm. I was not a great. As a kid, I was a good baseball player because I was very good at hitting. Field, not so much. So.
But it's weird though, because I think the time we officially met was our wives knew each other, and Claudia had said, I'm going to meet Kate's new boyfriend. He plays for Danbury United. You might know him. Oh my God. Yeah.
He was at my third date with my wife ever.
Yeah. But the lyric was, he plays for Danbury, and we just had that banter on the field. And I got away, I was like, this guy's a mug. Like, who the fuck do you think he is? Now, I understand he's got a little bit of a history where he clearly was obviously an okay player in Connecticut, right? So I understand the confidence on the field. But like, I was like, what? I was like, okay, as long as it's not that, literally, I was like, as long as it's not that like, I'm not saying it on the camera, right?
That guy.
So I walk in, I'm like, oh my God, it is him. I was like, oh my days. But then he didn't recognize me. I don't think you recognized me as the referee. Like, no one ever recognized me as the referee. So I was like, oh, how you going, mate? Yeah, I'm good, yeah. And I kept quiet that I was the referee for the whole trip. But yes, you are. You're a very different player. But listen, I'll be honest with you, I enjoyed the banter on the stuff. It never bothered me at all. And again, it comes down to like, just respect. It comes down to like in that moment, everyone's just like trying to be the best human being they can be in that moment. Their emotions kind of get a little bit, you judge them in that moment,
It's funny because it's I feel like I'm pretty good controlling my emotions for the most part. I think, like anyone else, I have my moments, but I don't know what it is about an athletic environment that it can be challenging sometimes. I mean, and you see it all the time with incidents with parents and kids and stuff. And one of my greatest fears is that when my kids start playing, and they are already starting to play sports, and even if it's, ballet or my daughter, whatever, that, I'll, have perspective, be calm, like don't be an idiot, be a good parent, just sit there and watch and, be positive. But I know I'm waiting for that day. I'm definitely going to need some coaching because you get so emotionally involved sometimes with this stuff, and it's like it's only a game, but I don't know.
Well, I don't know if football is only a game, number one, right? Like soccer, I don't know. It's
no,
there's
exactly.
a lot of emotion,
it's not right. It's like
does,
for me, it never was, but it's like it's hard. It's very hard.
I mean, but I do think so. I know what you're talking about, the pressure of the parents, and I, me and my dad, we had some real big arguments on the field where parents would have to go to my dad and say, like, ease it down, and it probably did impact me. And I think we're more aware of that type of pressure, and like as you just said, it's very clear that you're aware and conscious of it. I told my middle guy, who's really getting into soccer, that he just needs to always have fun, because I don't think actually my dad ever really told me that. It was
but you're an Englishman. I mean, think about it. The fans from different teams kill each other.
Yeah, no, I know. So I didn't have that. Yeah,
right. It's a tough perspective, especially and in the U.S. you have like football fans. They fight, but in Europe, I don't think Americans understand. Maybe some of them do, but the level of like devotion for teams in other countries. Like in England and even Portugal to a certain extent. I mean, my father, for example, is such a fan that his brothers like one team in Portugal, and half the brothers like one team and half the brothers like the other team. It just turned out that way. And they're the two rival teams. It's a Porto and Benfica. The mother at one point weren't allowed to speak about soccer at family events because they literally would get in verbal fights with one another. Not physically, thankfully, but they would literally get in verbal fights. I mean, that's how passionate they were for their team, Like, no, your president's a crook. No, your president's a crook.
No.
It's unbelievable. But.
It is. I mean, we're not going to get into too much of the depths with this, but my middle guy really got into the European Championships this year. And I told him at the end, he was devastated that we lost.
Was it before or after you put face paint on him?
Oh, yeah. So you saw that picture?
Yeah, I did. It was priceless. I loved it.
Yeah, so I put the face paint and we get excited about the game. But no, so it's weird. It was a parenting moment, actually. It was a parenting moment. So maybe we could maybe finish on this, because I started off the show talking about football and talking about the fact that, it's not, you said is it part of living a good life? And I said my decision to support Crystal Palace was obviously, I'm not sure, a good decision. And I, of course, have exposed my child, right, to football, to Crystal Palace, and to England, right? He could have decided to support Italy because the family connections to Italy.
Yeah, 50-50.
Like, the USA are so good at sport. He could have done USA, but this guy believes he's England. He said he's going to play for England. He said at the beginning of the World Cup, I'm English. If you tell him anything, I'm English. So I've now gone and got him stuck in what could be a lot of heartache and pain. And he was really happy and excited. And of course, we lost the World. And I told him, I said in the semi-final, I said, we may lose. I said, you go and stand with England. Like, We're going to lose at some point, pal, you know? And, you know, he's been very blessed in the fact we got to the World Cup semi-finals in 2018 and then obviously the European Championships 2020. But when they lost, it was penalties. I've got the wisdom of England and penalties. I left the room, right? Now, I will first of all tell you that I swore very aggressively during the game. My kids have learned, I'm not proud of it, but you said about, I don't know what comes over you. Yeah. I turn into a crazy dude, right? And so my kids, like, it's really bad when my middle guy swears in the same way as I do sometimes when he's angry. I'm like, I can't really tell him off because I know where he's got it from. But anyway, I left the room because of the penalty situation. I was like, we could lose. And I didn't want him to see my anxiety and struggling. And he really thought we were going to win. This is too painful. Anyway, the cut and short is that once we missed our first penalty and I saw, you know, I went upstairs to my bedroom and I started to get emotional and I was close to crying. And I didn't want my kid to be crying, like see me crying. Yeah. I'm up there, I hear Saka's missed the penalty, which I knew he was going to miss the penalty. Like, I feel bad. I'm not like, he's had, all of them were heroes and he's how a 19-year-old has that courage to step up. Like, he was amazing throughout the World Cup. But it's England. I just had that negative feeling he was going to miss. I walked up, cried, wanted to cry. But then it suddenly hit me, I've got a child now. I need to be down comforting him. Right. And it was the first time in my experience I couldn't, usually I stay in my room and don't talk to anyone for hours after England lose. But I had to go down and interact and face everyone, and I had to go and hug and cuddle him and let him know that this is what it's like supporting England. And I said to him, this is not as bad as what it would be if Crystal Palace get relegated. So, you know, I had to go and put my feelings aside in that moment and comfort him. I just hope he gets to witness something that I haven't witnessed with England at some point in the future. But yeah, I do think there's a connection with football and a good life, and we won't get into it with this show, but there's also a really cool history. I mean, those football clubs are factories. They were factories, and they were the working class people that formed a team to represent their factory in their town. And you know, the rivalries came about because of that. And
it was a representation of them. It's the sports is a microcosm of life. No, it's funny how we come full circle in the conversation. Well, I hope this is one of many. We weren't too sure what episode this was at the beginning, and
pretty certain it's number 11 by now. I've counted enough times over and over.
Well, maybe we could do 10 and 11, right? Maybe it could be 10 and 11.
We could split it up. I thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the conversation, the knowledge you dropped for us, and I look forward to conversations in the future.
Yeah, Matt, really appreciate it. I'm going to go out and buy some kind of England jersey.
Thank you. Because
support.
I'm not going to lie, you know, it does frustrate me when I see all of the Portuguese and Italian stuff on Facebook, because obviously this is the community I live in. So having some more England people in my circle would be great.
I'll support you, man. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, have a good night. It was nice having you in our home for a little, although this isn't our home.